Okay guys, we're going to talk about roots and radical expressions, and we're going to talk about simplifying them. Roots and radicals, when I'm talking about roots and radicals, we're just talking about that sign. Okay, we know that is a square root, but we're going to talk about different kinds of roots or radicals. That's essentially the same thing. Okay, so this thing right here is the radical sign. Okay, it tells us right there. The number, so if a square root, that's called the index. Okay, this thing inside is called the radicand. So we could have a square root. Okay, technically there's a little 2 there. We just don't ever write a 2 there. We can have cube roots, fourth roots, fifth roots. There's just so many possibilities, but that's what we're talking about, is different kind of roots using these radical signs. The type of root it is the index, or that n. Okay, we've seen this before, simplifying radicals, these square roots. Square root of 200, well, we don't know something that multiplies by itself to get 200. So what we can do is we can break this down. This is 2 and 100. Okay, when I see 100, I know 10 and 10. And 10 and 10. Once I break it down in 2 pairs like that, I don't need to keep going. You can, but it's a little bit more work. I already have a pair of 10s, so there's my pair of 10s. Remember, when it makes a pair, that's what goes outside of the radical. Okay, so 10, but I have a 2 left behind, so that's going to stay inside. Okay, now let's do the same thing with 27. Square root of 27 is 9 and 3. Okay, break those up. Well, 9 I know can break down into 3 and 3. Okay, so I crossed it off so I don't use that 9 again. Now I just want pairs since we're dealing with square roots. Okay, we want a pair of 3s, so a 3 goes on the outside, and we're left with a 3 on the inside. Okay guys, let's look at a couple when we're going to do like a fourth root or a cube root. Okay, before we do that, let's just think, if I did the square root of 16, okay, that was just what 2 things could I multiply by to get 16? Well, we know that if I multiply 4 by 4, that gave me 16. So it was 4. So the square root of 16 is 4. So we're going to use that same logic to do like the fourth root of 16. Okay, so what number do I multiply by itself 4 times to get 16? Well, if we look at the chart that we made earlier, we can look under that x to the 4th column and say, okay, what thing did we multiply to get 16? Well, 16, if we look over to the left, it was 2. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 gave me 16. Well, let's just think 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So the fourth root of 16 is 2. Okay. Same kind of concept if we're doing the cube root of 8. What thing multiplied by itself 3 times is going to give me 8? Well, if we look at that, what thing was cubed to get 8? It was 2 cubed was to give me 8. So 2 times 2 times 2 gives us 8. So the answer of the cube root of 8 is just 2. Okay? Now, for any time we're doing like a fourth root of 0, fifth root of 0, third root of 0, if 0 is underneath, it's just 0. Okay, just like when you did the square root. Now for a negative, you had to be careful. Okay, what could I multiply by 4 times to get negative 16? We kind of already know that 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 gives me 16. What if I did negative, but I want a negative 16? So wonder if we'd have to put a negative 2. Let's just see what happens. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Same thing over here. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Positive 4. So 4 times 4 is positive 16. So I didn't get a negative 16. That's because it is impossible if we have an even root. Okay, if we have an even root, so if it's a fourth root, square root, sixth root, we can't have a negative underneath. Okay, that's when we had to do with like imaginary. So this is going to be not real. Okay, it's not possible. And now let's look at this next one. We know that the cube root of 8 is 2. But if we want negative 8, how about let's try negative 2? Let's see if that works. Well, negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, times negative 2 gives me negative 8. That's what I wanted. So the cube root of a negative 8 is 2. Now here's the kind of thing there. If we have an odd root, okay, if this number right there, the index is odd, it's okay to have a negative. That just means your answer is going to be a negative number. Okay guys, when we're doing cube roots, square roots, fourth roots, always look to see if it's a perfect cube, square, fourth, whatever you're doing. That'll make it easier if you can just see right away what it would be. But for this first one, there's not anything that I can cube to get 16. Okay, I can look at that chart, there's nothing there, so we'll have to break it down. So let's go 4 and 4. 4 will be 2 and 2. 2 and 2. And when I use these, I cross them off so I don't get confused. Okay, it's a cube root though, so that means that we're going to look for groups of 3. So we have one group of 3 2s. Okay, so just like when we did this with square roots, we're going to bring a group of one group out. So there's 1 2 out there. We had a 2 that was left behind, so we're going to put 2 inside of a cube root. That's my answer there. Now let's look at this one. Okay, you could break this down, but before I do that, let's see, is there a number that I can multiply by itself 3 times to get 1,000? Well, yeah, I can do that by 10. Okay, now, but we notice this is negative, so the first thing we got to check is what kind of root is it? It is a cube root, so it's an odd root, so it's okay to have a negative. So this is just going to be negative 10. Alright, last one, square root of 81. Well, it's a negative, so let's look. Is this an even or an odd root? Really, it's a square root, so we know that it is an even root. We can't square root a negative. We would have an imaginary, so this is going to be not real. Okay. Alright, let's go to the next slide. Okay, now sometimes what they're going to do is they're going to add variables and numbers when we're doing these, and we're just going to simplify them. Before you get overwhelmed, just do it step by step. Let's just do the number first. So we're doing the square root of 9. Well, that's actually pretty easy. The square root of 9 is just 3. Okay. Now, we have to look at our x's. So we have 10 x's, and we're looking for groups of 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write 10 x's out. You can pause it if you need to write all those 10 x's out. But if we're looking for groups of 2, well, we have 1 group of 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 groups of x's. Okay, so I'm going to actually have x to the 5th. Okay, now let's look at this next one. It doesn't have a number, so we're going to deal with the x's. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and write out 16 x's just so we can visually see it. And I'll kind of show you a shortcut here in a second. But let's go ahead and write those out. Okay, so since it is a 4th root, okay, I'm looking for groups of 4. So I have 1 group of 4, 2 groups of 4, 3 groups of 4, and I actually forgot another. That was only 12 x's, so I have 1 more. So I have 4 groups of 4. So I'm going to put x to the 4th. Okay, since there was 4 groups, I can bring out 4x to the 4th. Okay, now the same thing with y's. Well, I have 4 y's, and we want groups of 4. Well, there's 1 group of 4 y's, so we're just going to have y to the 1st, or just y. Okay, now another way that you can do this, okay, and some of you might have noticed, the root or the index is 4, so it's kind of like division. How many times does 4 go into 16? Well, it went into 16 4 times, so it ended up being x to the 4th. Okay, same thing with the y's. Okay, 4 went into 4 how many times? Just once, so it was y to the 1st, or just y. Okay, that's kind of an easier way or a shortcut of doing it, but when in doubt, you can always write it out. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing, simplify these. So let's look at the number first. We're square rooting 27. Well, when I square root 27, it doesn't break in evenly. There's not a number we multiply by itself to get 27. So we're going to have to do what we did earlier and break it down. Okay, so 27, we can do 9 and 3. Okay, that's a 9. 9, we can do 3 and 3. So cross out that 9. So we're looking for pairs since it's just a square root. So we have 1 group of 2 3s. So I'm going to bring a 3 out. Okay, and we have 1 left behind. So I'm going to leave some space since I'm going to do some stuff with the variables, and then just put my 3 inside of that radical. Okay, now let's look at the y's. I'm looking for groups of 2. So then we have 2 y's. So 2 goes into 2 just 1 time. So it's just y. Okay, now 2 goes into 7. Well, if I try to divide 7 by 2, it's going to go in there 3 times, so x cubed, right, with just 1 left over. And if I wrote that out, okay, if I wrote 7 x's, and I was looking for groups of 2, I have 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, and I had 1 left over. So that one goes inside of the radical. And that's our final answer. Now, okay, on this next one, cube root of 16, we don't know what that is, so we're going to have to break it down. 16 can break down into 8 and 2. You can do 4 and 4, but I'm going to do 8 and 2. Because if I think about it, 8 is a perfect cube. So I know that 8 is just 2, 2, and 2. We could break it down into 4 and 2 and then get those. This is just kind of a shortcut. But if we look, we're looking for groups of 3. So there's our 3 2's. Okay, so we're going to bring a 2 out. Okay, leave some space and then put the cube root of the 2 that was left behind. Okay, now I'm looking for groups of 3. I have 2 R's, so I don't even have 3 R's to make one group. So I'm going to just have to leave both of those R squared, that R squared behind. Okay, same thing, I'm looking for the S's. I have 9 S's. Well, 3 goes into 9 3 times, so it's going to be S cubed. Okay, that's an S, terrible S, but that's an S. And there's my answer. Okay, now if we look at the last one, we want the 4th root of 160. X is y to the 7th, so let's break this down. I can do 16 and 10. Okay, 16. If we think the 4th root of 16 is just 2, so I can actually just make this as a 2, 2, 2, and 2. There's my group. Okay, 10 is 5 and 2. I have no other thing that I can pair up with, so I'm going to have a 2 that comes on the outside, and I'm going to leave some space, and then do the 4th root of, well, I have a 5 and a 2. Remember, we just multiply those, so that's just going to be 10. Okay, now I look at the x's. Well, I don't have anything to make a group of 4 with. I only have 1, so just x. And then 7 divided by 4, okay, or 4 goes into 7 just 1 time, so I have 1x, and 3 is left behind. Oh, sorry, 1y, and then 3 is left behind, so this is just y to the cube. Okay, and that's my final answer. Okay, go ahead and try the next ones. If you have extra questions, make sure you ask them. These ones are you'll get better as you practice them.